Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Bitcoin and Beyond. I'm Melanie Carstens, your host, and today we are joined by Tycho Onnasch. He is the former GM at Trust Machines, and he is currently building or founder of Zest. So, yeah, welcome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, I saw the show, before, and many friends were on, so yeah, excited to be part of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I've met some amazing. I've been so fortunate to meet the sort of amazing community at Stacks through this. So I love it. I can't wait for each week to roll by to have a conversation. Anyway, so yeah, let's jump right in, and let's talk about your childhood. You said you are in the Netherlands, one of my favorite places on earth. So let's talk about that and maybe any cues that there were that you were going to end up building in Bitcoin, any early kind of feelings about the planet or whatever it was.
Yeah, good question. It's always hard to answer that because it's kind of, retrospective in many ways.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I guess I grew up in Amsterdam, right, in the Netherlands, and yeah, I guess I was, quite studious kid from a young age, so and really drawn to studying history, and just kind of like, trying to kind of unravel the deep truths, behind many things in our world, and then went on to study history at university, right? And then one of the things that I found very very interesting always while studying history was sort of like this idea of like, okay, what are actually the sort of the economic forces, right, that are shaping many things that are kind of going on. Because when you read the history books, it's like kind of, great men sort of standing up and making big changes, but often there's like an economic undercurrent, right, that sort of supports many of
Yeah.
those developments, and then it just kind of takes an event, right? It takes kind of one person to then sort of double down on it, right? And yeah, so I think that was always sort of very very interesting to me, and then with that, like, the history of money and how sort of monetary systems develop was sort of, something I thought about, from early on. And yeah, then, while sort of, doing more techie stuff on the side, I guess those things kind of, united when discovering Bitcoin and,
Mm.
blockchains and all that stuff.
Yeah. You studied obviously history at Oxford, and I'm fascinated with history and the kind of idea that we've almost been fed a history that has kind of been maybe we've been lied to a little bit
Mhm.
about where it all kind of started. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm very interested in
Mhm.
how far it really goes back as well. Are those the kind
Yeah.
of things you that were involved in it? Are you interested in that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would maybe say, like, yeah, maybe being lied to is maybe not sort of the way I would put it, but it can feel like that, right? And maybe, that's then, in some ways that becomes the reality, right? So it is like a very very honest thing to say, and yeah, I would just say that, like, there are, yeah, it's just usually very interesting, right? There are sort of certain narratives that are dominant, right? And those narratives kind of get overtaken by other narratives, and that's basically kind of what the study of history is, right? You sort of see that kind of, people very much believe one thing, and then, all of a sudden, like, it changes, right? And the narrative, in history also changes, right? And people basically, view things differently, seemingly overnight, right? And
Mm,
and usually it's very interesting when there is like kind of one, dominant narrative, right? Which is sort of like, I think, in our modern world is something along the lines of that. Our monetary system has kind of been in existence for as long as kind of anyone is alive, right? Like, only sort of
mm,
extremely old people have lived in a different monetary system, which is very unique, right? Because monetary systems have, like, shifted very, like, very very much, right? And in many ways, like, say, the US dollar, right, that underpins most of global commerce is one of the oldest currencies in the world, right? But Americans always think of themselves as sort of very new, and that just creates this kind of friction, right? Where sort of people believe so much in one thing, right? It's so sort of strongly of a group thing kind of thing that the status quo is not going to change, that then the change can even be more intense, right? And more abrupt and more drastic, right? And I think that's kind of what that's sort of what I'm seeing in with Bitcoin, right? It's like the groupthink was so strong around that the monetary system would never change, and it was kind of this God-given thing that even creates like a bigger opportunity, right? It makes the opportunity even bigger for people who sort of like inquire and go deep, right?
In a way, to me, it feels a little bit like, I know this is probably a bit of a stretch, but like we are experiencing like the fall of the Roman Empire in many ways. When it comes, we're in one of these changes that I think hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, these kind of I mean, maybe sort of people watch this back at a later stage, but we're just, I think, 1 week after the big sort of tariff announcement, right, by President Trump, and many sort of people are talking about this sort of idea of, or Balaji talks about this a lot, right, the author of the network state, about this idea of like, this is the end of the American empire, and there's sort of a lot to that, but I think we've kind of been conditioned maybe a bit by the previous time such a big change happened, when it was kind of the British Empire sort of rolling over into the American empire. Maybe we're conditioned a bit that there is something new that's immediately waiting for us, right? And it's going to be overtaken by crypto, or it's going to be overtaken by China, as maybe some people believe, right? But maybe it'll just be a bit messy for a while. That's also entirely possible, and things also don't change overnight. But yeah, I think if one thing is interesting about the study of history, then it's that when something kind of looks inevitable, that something changes, people usually think it will take 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but it just kind of then takes one thing for it to just change very quickly. And that, yeah.
It's that saying, slowly then all at once.
Exactly that. It's kind of like this, like in I always think a great example is like in 1900, right? And people were kind of plotting the productive capacity of the British Empire versus the United States, and they were sort of plotting, okay, if we keep going at these trend lines, then the United States will overtake the British Empire in productive capacity in the year 1940, right? That was kind of when they plot, okay, then it will overtake it. So people in 1900 had this kind of idea, okay, like America is coming up, and at some point it will overtake. But then it already happened in 1916, right? Because the First World War broke out, and a lot of weapons were being produced, and then that was your event, right? The thing that was inevitable then all of a sudden happened very quickly, and we'll get something like that for Bitcoin. And until that happens, it just maybe feels like we're waiting or something like that. But yeah, it probably will happen. But the beauty of it is too that we play an active role in this, right? So we can also kind of help shape things a little bit.
What a wonderful time to be alive, right? To be able to experience this, and to have, if you think about sort of great innovations historically, it's kind of very concentrated. The sort of the group, the people who are heavily involved in it, or who heavily congratulated for it, or whatever. But when it comes to this, it's just such a wave. It's a tsunami of people that are kind of building and pushing it forward, and it just keeps collecting people as it grows. Very exciting. What do you think of Balaji, the network state?
I think it's very, very interesting, right? I think he's probably one of the clearest voices in like global affairs for anyone to follow. Like, I said it to my parents to be like, stay in the loop. This is the way you get like, this sort of really makes you think. But I mean, sort of, do I fully believe in the thesis of network states? I mean, I'm not sort of so concerned about that, but I think what I mainly find very interesting is sort of his analysis of like maybe the way that MAGA crowd is overestimating itself in some parts, the way that people may be underestimating China, this idea of like the kind of united decentralized internet versus the scenic superstate, right, as he always says, in the as sort of things are lining up for the next for this century essentially. And yeah, those are things that I think all very very strongly resonate, right? And so yeah, we need to build to preserve freedom. I think that's very much the message, and yeah, the way to do that is by contributing to the internet, right? And ways to move value around over the internet and ensure property rights exist in this digital world.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea of the phrase cloud first, land second, you know, where the idea that, and I feel so much like that if you look at our Stacks community, you know, we've almost creating the kind of vision a little bit that he speaks of. You know, we're all teaching each other, we're bonding over a real shared ideology. People sort of are drawn to the blockchain that that exemplifies who they are and how they think and what they want to make and build, you know. And I find that people on Stacks all have a very similar, I mean, not everybody, obviously, because you can never get everybody everywhere, but a large sort of group, the standout group is building for the right reasons, you know. So maybe we're creating a network state without even knowing it.
I think so. And it's like it's a very strong online community, right? That's kind of brought together by a shared purpose, right? You can call it building on Bitcoin. You can also sort of in a very utilitarian way call it making STX price go up, all right? But yeah, it's like these people are sort of united by a shared purpose, and most of them, every day kind of showing up for it, right? In ways that, maybe in the past, like, people in nation states would sort of show up every day for each other to kind of go to war and stuff like that. So yeah, it's like a new paradigm, and it's funny to sort of be able to meet many people from all over the world with very different backgrounds who are sort of united in that same mission.
Yeah. Okay. You've written about the digital feudal age. What is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think one way that I think a bit of, like, sort of looking at crypto or blockchains through a historical lens, right? I think one sort of interesting paradigm to use is that we're still very early, right, in the digital age. The internet sort of started in the 90s. It only sort of really went consumer in the 2010s, right? So 10 15 years ago it started, and
The
it's
internet was
rapidly
10,
progressing.
15.
Yeah, it's
Oh my
very
God.
recent, but things go fast, right? And yeah,
It
like
feels,
the
sorry, but that feels so weird hearing you say that. It feels so long. Anyway, sorry.
yeah, and this idea of the digital feudal age, right, or digital feudalism is like, if you think about medieval Europe, right, which is kind of where the modern world comes from, right, in many ways. In medieval Europe, there is sort of, there's no money, right? There are not really property rights, or only for sort of select few people who can enforce them, right? Like the feudal lords, and most people, like the vast majority of people, are land laborers, right? So they work on the land, and they are physically owned by the landowner. So if the landowner would, land would change hands, it comes with the people, right? And they are farmers, and they are being farmed, right?
Yeah.
And that's in many ways very similar to the early digital age, with like the sort of the large platforms, right? The Facebooks, the Googles of this world, where users are essentially don't have any identity, right? Because their identity exists in Google or in Facebook or something like that. So they don't own their identity. So they're similar to the feudal worker. They also don't own any property, because all the data they produce there kind of goes to the feudal lord, right? To the Mark Zuckerberg or the Sundar Pichai, or whoever you might leads the platform. and that's where all the value aggregates, right? So people are essentially being farmed. And then what you see happening at the end of the feudal age is that kind of little cities form that have their own, economic activity, and they do trade. And the people in the cities, they are free, right? They have an identity, they have a name, they can, pass on their stuff to their children and so on. And they're free to transact, and they have property. And the kings or some of the feudal lords, they support this because they're like, hey, this is economic activity that we can tax, right? So this is let these little cities be.
Yeah.
And I would say that's very much what blockchains are in the digital age, right? They are these sort of small, kind of cornered off little parts where addresses do own the assets, or do own what they produce. People on Farcaster, they own their own content. They can take it elsewhere. um, and so you have identity in address form, you have property in in tokens form or database entry form, and in that sense, it's the early seeds of digital freedom, right?
Yeah. Which is, in a way, really sort of ties nicely, actually, into what Balaji's doing.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's you probably would hold this view. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. Look, I'm so excited to see what happens. I think there's like a little bit of like, when I read the sovereign individual, and there's parts of that where it's kind of like, be prepared for like doom and gloom, because there's going to be like, big trouble before there's a split. And then you're going to have like the cryptos and the non-cryptos. Society's not going to, I mean, it's impossible for society to split to such a degree. I think it's going to be sort of a bit of both everywhere, right? Do you see it existing like that, sort of fiat and Bitcoin together? Or do you think ultimately, I mean, it's obviously very hard to predict, but
Yeah, I think somewhat, things coexist usually for a long time, right? Like progress is kind of doesn't happen everywhere all at once, right? So the feudal age well, in Western Europe, right? So say where I'm from, in the Netherlands was probably one of the first places where cities came up and people started having rights and property. So you're talking in the 1500s, right? 1400s, maybe 1300s in some cases. And then in the 1600s it really takes off, right? But in Russia, right, feudalism existed until 1860, right? So that's 150 years ago. So, and in large parts of Africa, basically slavery only existed until it was abolished, right? Also fairly recently, or in many ways maybe it still kind of continues under the hood in some ways, right? So progress is sort of it doesn't happen everywhere at once, but it's probably best to just be in the place where it's happening, right? Rather than waiting in the place where it's not happening for it to come to you.
I know.
So,
well, like me, I'm sitting on the southern tip of Africa. Trust me, I'm going to be like, hello, what about us down here?
yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about Bitcoin before we talk about Zest, because I really want to kind of get into that. When did you get involved with Bitcoin, and kind of this feeling of, did you come to Bitcoin thinking I'm going to build on it, or how did that sort of thing, how did it start there?
Yeah, I think so I kind of knew about Bitcoin for a long time, right? Often people have these stories of like, wow, and then I discovered Bitcoin and sort of my life changed. Maybe that sort of says something about maybe that I'm still quite young. But I remember, when I went to secondary school, like, we heard about Bitcoin. It was like an interesting thing, but not really to invest in. But people were just, oh, this is internet money, and it's like it's going up, it's going down. It's sort of like things get hacked. Like, there's something going on here. So I always kind of knew it existed, and people were talking about it like, oh, this could be something like digital gold or something. Of course, being underage, obviously didn't have a credit card to sort of buy any of it. It was also too difficult to access, back then, especially, with with the European bank card or something. These things were just not very feasible. And yeah, it sort of like was this thing that kind of kept going, and then people kind of would say it's dead, and then it kind of kept coming, and people would say it's dead. And then in 2016, 17, or especially in 2017, it sort of really went. It really kind of became big. And then then I would say I really started looking at it much more seriously, and then also discovered Ethereum. I discovered this idea of fully programmable smart contracts and the sort of things that could be built with that. And that was sort of the thing that really was like a big aha moment, right? Like, okay, this is sort of the seed of an actual self-sustaining economy or ecosystem, right? And so I bought some ETH, I bought some Ethereum Classic, I bought some BTC, and then everything went down by a lot, and I would say that then and exchanges got hacked, and I was like, man, like, if we have this smart contract technology, but it's not even being used to do the most basic operation in this industry, which is trading. And people were talking on Reddit about decentralized exchanges and stuff, and I was like, you know what? I'll look at this again when this kind of problem is solved, right? Or when people found an actual use case for smart contracts where they're actually using the underlying technology. So I stepped out for a bit, and then in 2020 kind of looked back, and then Uniswap was there, and people were trading a lot on it, and Aave was there, and people were borrowing against their crypto assets, and that really felt like, hey, like I've this is A, very interesting, and B, I've missed something. There's a lot to catch up on, because this is the seed of something potentially really, really big, right? And if what's happening on Ethereum can be done with BTC, which is what everyone would just really want, then we really have something world changing.
How did you? You studied at Oxford, right? And it was history and politics.
That's right.
So where did the computer coding building? I'm like not a tech person, but where did that all? How did that happen?
Yeah, I would say I was quite interested in it, right? I was like playing modded games in my free time and stuff like that. So I was always quite interested in technology and software, but I never really considered doing anything real with it. And then, but just before I graduated, I started a software company, somewhat by accident, with a friend who studied computer science in Oxford, and two other friends who were sort of non-technical, just like me. And the way that kind of evolved is that we were like 4 co-founders, right? 1 technical and 3 not. And I just started taking more responsibility over our products. We were selling to customers with the 3 of us, but we realized that what we were building was not what we were selling to customers. So I was like, okay, I'll take care of that. You keep selling, and then I'll also try to figure out how we can actually make what we're selling. So it was very much like a crash course, driven by pure economic necessity to keep everything afloat and to keep our promises to our users and our customers. And yeah, that's sort of then how became more product oriented and stuff like that.
Amazing. And then when did you find Stacks and Trust Machines? Because were you the GM at Trust Machines?
Yeah, I was the I think I was the second or the third hire at Trust Machines. So still when it was very much under wraps. But yeah,
so when
I knew about
start?
Yeah, that journey started in 2021. So before that, I knew of Stacks. I knew that it was this project to build, to create first identities and then smart contracts for Bitcoin. But it wasn't live. And at that time there was a lot of stuff that wasn't live, right? Like say the Cardanos of this world, and the top 10 or 20 tokens, were filled with things that were definitely not live or definitely not used by anyone. So I
Yeah.
was a little bit like, okay, this looks very legit. There are very serious people working on this, but like, let me just see something, right? And then the Stacks mainnet launched. That was January 2021, and that was just as we, basically exited the SaaS company that I started before.
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, this is interesting. People are building stuff. Then the first decentralized applications are being built, and I started getting more involved in the community, and basically through Twitter, and then eventually met Monib, and then he asked me to join Trust Machines.
Wow. So that was 2021.
That's right.
Okay. So that was when I also came along, bouncing along into Stacks. Okay.
Yeah.
So you joined Trust Machines. And what was it like back then, Trust Machines? Because it must have been very few of you and kind of
Yeah, it was super
very early.
disorganized in a
Mm,
great way. I said
pardon?
it was super disorganized in a great way. Um, yeah, like the original, like when it started, the idea was very much, okay, we're going to build applications on Bitcoin, and since Stacks is, basically the only thing that's really usable, we're primarily going to build stuff on Stacks, or if we build stuff, we'll have to use Stacks. And yeah, Munib basically hired me because he was like, okay, stuff about DeFi. I've been using a lot of DeFi protocols over that year. It was like a sort of big, crazy DeFi party, right? With like 10,000% APY here and there. And like I was just kind of like playing
Sure.
around with some money, and just doing that in my free time. So I was kind of one of the few people that knew about Stacks and DeFi at the same time. So Munib kind of set me off being okay, like, go build a Bitcoin DeFi app, and brought on Emil and Fernando, right, my co-founders, and we're like, okay, how would we do that, right? Specifically, a Bitcoin lending app, because that's what people want to do, right? They want to collateralize their BTC, or they want to earn yield on it in some way, and that's lending, right? That's basically the way
Mm.
that's done, and yeah, that's where the journey started, and basically we came up with a prototype that was unusable, and then we're like, look, if this lending yield generating kind of activity for BTC is ever going to be possible on Stacks, we need a way to move BTC from the L1 to the Stacks L2 in like a feeless, trustless way, right? And that's kind of the core insight that, then after obviously a lot of work, right, kind of combining our kind of practical, approach with Munib's technical vision, that led to essentially SBTC and Stacks Nakamoto. So I worked a lot on those two things, and the first designs, and kind of setting that whole process in motion.
So when was that? So this started a long time ago. You've been
It
building
did.
on that for
Yeah, so I would say, late 2021 we got started.
wow.
Early 2022 we realized it wasn't sort of going to work. And then I would say in early 2022, kind of the first like designs or design space sort of prototypes for SVTC came out. And then in September 2022, it was kind of solidified. It was like, hey, if we need SBTC, then we actually need to sort of, create Bitcoin finality for the
Mm.
Stacks chain. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And if we create Bitcoin finality for the Stacks chain, then we can introduce validation, and we can also make things faster, right? And that's where Nakamoto came from. So like that's at the end of 2022 that all kind of came together, and then the white papers were launched in December.
What sort of size team did you guys have to create this probably like, I mean, radically groundbreaking tooling? How many people does it take to do that?
Yeah,
I mean, it
I
took a
mean,
long time, didn't it? It took 22, 23, nearly 3 years, I guess.
yeah. I mean, so it didn't take so many people to sort of figure out what the requirements were, and like how the system should work. I would say that it mainly took a lot of people to actually, to build it and to test it and to make sure it's robust, and so on and so forth, right? So the actual kind of product effort was, I would say, is relatively light touch. part of it, and then the really heavy sort of hard work, time-consuming part of it is making sure that you have a signer system that works, right? That it's coordinating properly, then that's very well tested, it's very well audited, right? And all of these things. So doing SBTC and Nakamoto is very similar to building an entirely new blockchain from scratch, right? So so that's obviously where a lot of time went into.
It's beautiful to me, only recently kind of was I exposed to any form of code. I've kind of been one of those people that just press a button and the magic happens behind it. And with AI, that's changed everything. My son builds games. He's young. He's 12. He doesn't know how to code. He knows a little bit, but not enough to build a game. He tried to hire a dev, like a real world Roblox dev.
Wow.
He wrote him a mail. I'm like, you can't hire anybody. You don't have a job. Anyway, and we used AI. And so I just started really looking at it as a language, and it's so beautiful. It's like poetry, and you've got to kind of get it all right, and then it works so beautifully, but there can just be one or two little things, and you've just got to move those words around. I don't know. It seemed very poetic to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're speaking with computers, right? And that's kind of an instruction manual for a computer or a computer system. And but yeah, what you're saying is kind of exactly right? And of course, AI enables a lot of great things, but specifically for like critical systems, like something like stacks, you really need the very, very experienced, capable people looking at that kind of stuff, right? So
I wouldn't trust it to do. I mean, when we first started, because obviously it's a lot about prompting as well. And the first thing, we wanted a car, and we were like, make a car that drives, was my son's like prompt. That's why I started helping him. And it's like the car and the wheels, like it just goes like forward for like a minute, and then the wheels fall off, and it's like, okay, you've got to say, make it drive like in perpetuity. It was funny. Then we would do another thing, and then the wheels would come out on top. So you definitely wouldn't want to trust it with anything at the moment. You wouldn't want to trust it with anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's for things where you could just move fast and break things, and then definitely, right, when the stakes are not so high. But one of the funny things that I always mention is that my co-founder, who works on the smart contracts, also worked on a lot of the smart contracts that sit behind SBTC and so on. He told me, like, because clarity on stacks, right, the smart contract language, there's not a lot of people who really know it in depth. And he said he was asking ChatGPT about something related to clarity, and then he said, yeah, and I got my own code, right? So ChatGPT served something that he wrote previously somewhere else, which I think goes to show like how small this ecosystem really is, right?
Yeah, so funny. Anyway, okay, so how did this then evolve? You sort of were involved and still are, right? Involved with SBCT and Nakamoto through Trust Machines. And then there's Zest. So let's talk about how that relationship came about and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea basically was when this SBTC is close, right? We are going to spin out of Trust Machines, and we're going to build the sort of killer app for it, right?
Yeah.
And that's Zest Protocol. So that was always like the idea from the beginning, because that's kind of what we started with, right? We started with this, but we were brought in not to build a blockchain. We kind of ended up helping out with that, but we were brought in to build an application, right? And found something. That's what I always wanted to do, and same for the people that we brought as well. So that was always like the idea. And then end of 2023, like when it was getting close, then it was time to spin out and get everything ready so that we could start Bitcoin lending and BTC backed loans.
For anybody who doesn't know what Zest is, for people who may watch these in the future, And also I make nice little clips, so it might be a nice clip for us to do. Why don't you tell us, what is Zest? I mean, we already know what it does, but sort of, what it does, and for sort of non-technical people who might be interested to, and the problems that sort of it solves, or the offerings that it is for people who, I've got some Bitcoin, okay, what can I do with it?
Yeah, I would say like the largest financial use cases, right, for BTC are basically, well, number one, I don't want to sell my BTC, but I do want to get some liquidity against it, right? I want to borrow some money against my BTC. That's probably one of the most common things, right? That a Bitcoin holder has, because their BTC has appreciated, hopefully, and they would want to keep that appreciation, right? Or they believe so much in the asset, but also, they're kind of debating, well, it's worth so much, I would like to maybe, buy something or get some money against it to do something else. And so that's a very critical, like, important use case to build an economy, right? And that's one thing that Zest Protocol does very well. You can basically borrow against your BTC while moving your BTC to stacks, right, as SBTC, which is basically the best way to hold BTC in a smart contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, like, the second use case is for a lot of people, like, hey, I have some BTC and I would want to earn a little bit of yield with that, right? As people usually do with their assets, right? Say very wealthy people, they usually live off the yield that their assets produce, right? Be it dividends from stocks, or be it, something like rent from real estate, be anything like that. And that's, sort of the other thing that Zest Protocol can offer, essentially yield on BTC.
What are the risks of kind of lending out or borrowing on your Bitcoin?
Yeah, so that's a very, very important question, right? And that's essentially that's why we exist, right? To make that those risks as small as sort of humanly possible, right? So obviously, number one, right, you hold, say, BTC, so you obviously have risk from the Bitcoin blockchain imploding, or no, someone finding a quantum computer. So that's obviously always risk number one, right? Then risk number two is you then move your BTC to stacks. So stacks has Bitcoin finality, so it has Bitcoin security after every Bitcoin block. Right? But in between the Bitcoin blocks, you're reliant on the stacks validators, right? Essentially to custody your BTC properly, right? That backs SBTC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the second layer of trust. So it's Bitcoin blockchain, then it's stacks operating, and obviously stacks is doing a lot of great work to minimize that even further, to the extent that becomes the same as Bitcoin security. But that's like an ongoing process to continuously make that better. And then the third sort of risk that the user takes is essentially the protocol risk, right? So are the Zest Protocol smart contracts sound, right? Is no one able to get unauthorized access to funds, right? Essentially through what could be a bug in smart contracts. And that's a question basically of one, obviously auditing, to having very strong bug bounties, right? So if someone could find a potential hole in the smart contracts, they are very handsomely rewarded, right? If they were, right, no one has been able to do that since our very early beta. But yeah, someone could essentially make six figures if they would find some way to get unauthorized access to assets.
Really?
And
God,
yeah,
I need to learn how to be a bounty hunter hacker person.
oh, these people are some of the some of the best paid people in crypto. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, but by all means. So those are really the three risks that a user takes, right? So Bitcoin, stacks, and then the underlying protocol. And of course, Zest Protocol is the largest DeFi protocol on stacks, also in terms of assets. So yeah, it's been around the longest, right? We had any issues that we had, we experienced them during our kind of closed beta, right? since then it's been smooth sailing with $50 million in funds, which that's kind of how you get strong in this space.
That's amazing. And what about, I've heard things like when you put your money in, then you've got to be careful, like there's no actual sort of risks once you've deposited your funds. They're safe.
Well, it's. I mean, of course, these three risks always
Besides
remain.
those three things, I mean, it's what is it called when? I can't remember the word now. Oh, never mind. There's something I wanted to ask you because it's one of the things. I mean, now I've got no stacks. I was hacked last week, and
I'm very sorry to hear that. I was very sorry to hear that.
It's okay, I know. And I just right now before the show, I had my last what that was left because they took all my Bitcoin, they took all my stacks that was lying around, all my runes, my meme, everything. 4 years, 30 wallets. Poof. Anyway, I had some stacks that were because they couldn't take the stacks, obviously.
Right.
And but they were going to clear on a block time, and the block happened 10 minutes before the show. And I was sitting here, I had the funds, I was going to put like, $100 on the fee just to like get the money out and to try and beat them. And they beat me. So I was like, oh, that was the last of it. Anyway. Yeah.
It's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? These are the risks you take for being involved in something. We all know that this business goes on behind the scenes in Web 2. They just have built to a point where they're able to protect the consumer from even knowing what's going on behind the scenes. We'll get there. And I thought to myself as well, I can either mope about it and be sad, or I can turn it into something positive. I'm still going to not have any money, so just carry on. So I've come up with a plan, a beautiful collection that celebrates stacks called Proof of Stacks, and I'm going to drop that next week just to make something good out of it.
Yeah, make sure to let me know and let us know. And
you're included. I've included every. It's a celebration of stacks, so it's called Proof of Stacks, and it's going to be the celebration of stacks right now this week, this coming week, and it celebrates everything that's been built in our ecosystem. So yeah, I'm excited about it actually. So good comes out of I suppose it's all really how you look at things in life. Good can come out of anything. Anyway, you have had such an interesting life, I think. And I read somewhere.
I hope it only gets more interesting. That I hope so.
Yeah, it does. It's like, especially now, and especially in the work that you're involved in, but now you have debated Nobel Prize winners. I read somewhere debated Nobel Prize winners, written about monetary history. You've done all these crazy things. Sorry, I've got a bunch of people arriving at my house.
No worries.
They all just walked in, like 6 people. My son's birthday on Saturday, and his
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's today?
No, on Saturday. But his best friend, they're 12. Kids today are crazy. His best friend is 12, and he baked him his birthday cake. So the 2 boys have just arrived here now, walking in with this big cake. You can see this is real. This is unedited. This is live. This is life. Okay. It always reminds me of that. Remember when that guy was doing that news broadcast and his kids came in? Do you remember that?
Yeah, but back then that was revolutionary. I think then afterwards we had COVID and everything, and it's more normal for people's lives to be included in work or these things.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, let's talk about that. I mean, how did that happen? What did you debate? How does this fit into like the grand story of us and civilization? And it's a
Yeah,
big question.
yeah, big questions, but I think it's yeah. I mean, if this is sort of what I guess what gets me out of bed every morning, right? It's okay,
Yeah.
we're building something new, and and it's essentially like, you know, Bitcoin is a store of value today, and even the Treasury Secretary of the United States says that, right? It is a store of value, but it's not yet an economy, right? Or
Mm,
there's no sort of civilization built on top of it. It's just a store of value today, and that's kind of what we can do. And of course, civilization starts with, yeah, with finance, right? It's kind of maybe
yeah.
not sort of the most obvious thing, but like, yeah, first there is property, right? And Bitcoin is property, it's digital property, and
Mm,
finance is essentially, property over time, right? It's introducing the time elements into property, and
mm,
sort of trading things over time, or lending something out to get it back at a certain stage, or borrowing against it, right? All of those things. So it's kind of very primitive, right? We're very early,
mm,
um, and yeah, it's just it's great to be able to work on something sort of so meaningful so early on, right? And
yeah.
um, yeah, so I think it can be the basis for the internet civilization, right? The immutable base layer where all data in the world, right, settles
Mm,
on. And
mm.
yeah, I think that's very exciting, and I think that's the vision that many people in Stack share.
Is that what I mean, what was the debate with the Nobel Prize winner?
Mm, that was so I participated in a conference, and it was with Joseph Stiglitz, right?
Yeah.
He's the American uh, economist. I believe he was leading the World Bank or something, but he's written a couple of very, well-read books about, global macro, and about developing economies, and all of these things. And yeah, in 2021, so I was at this conference. I had participated in a panel about crypto, and he was there at dinner, so we talked, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm working very much in crypto." And he was like, "Oh, well, that's all like not Bitcoin, like forget about it, like that's not going to be anything anytime soon, right?" And yeah, then I walked him through some points, and he sort of ended up leaving the conversation as sort of, well, fine, like maybe you're right, maybe Bitcoin could be a reserve asset, but not in my lifetime. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the end of it. And I wrote a little piece about that, I think, on my personal blog that you probably saw.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's basically what we talked through. So like, yeah, I wouldn't say I won the debate, but I hope I was one of many people who maybe over the course of a few interactions, maybe brought him to become more open-minded towards the possibility for Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of people who are going to have books in them one day. The life that you have lived is an extraordinary one, and I feel like I speak to a lot of people who I get that same feeling with. You
Mm,
connecting. It's nice that you blog because it's a story for one day, an extraordinary story of these people who potentially built an entirely new economy.
yeah, maybe, but
Mm.
I think the beauty of it also is that many people were totally forgotten in their lifetimes, who then people wrote great books about. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an outcome that, yeah, that could happen, but I don't really think about it so much, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah,
We
it's a
never
problem
know.
for another day.
Yeah, you never know.
You can
I'm a
write the
writer.
books, yeah.
You've got a lot of books behind you. What is your favorite? How do you read? Do you read kind of what do you read?
Yeah, so these are actually, I'm just visiting my family right now in Amsterdam, and these are actually my father's books. So I'm sitting in front of a very big bookshelf in our sort of little library office setup here. But yeah, when it comes to reading, I guess I usually just read some new books that come out. I think Alex Karp had written a very interesting book, The Technological Republic, that I read recently. Usually just on a Kindle, right? Just kind of flick through a few things. But yeah, sometimes it's also nice to really go into something timeless and immerse yourself in a new world, right? I studied a lot of Latin and ancient Greek at school, and just like to really go in a different universe and see that people are operating there, that they're still human, they're still doing kind of the same things that we do, but just in a completely different context. That's sometimes liberating, but I also have to say I haven't really had that much time in the last year to sort of to read. So maybe that's something I should make more time for.
Yeah, you strike me as a person who would, like, on a Sunday pick up a book, chill
Yeah,
back.
I would
If you weren't
if
having to flick through crypto Twitter and 1,200 bookmarks open up on your screen, right?
Yeah,
The
and I
life
usually
would be
don't. I have to know.
interesting.
I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter on Sundays. Um, of course, I do during the week, but yeah, no, spending time with smart friends, spending time with family, trying to read a little bit when the opportunity arises. But yeah, sometimes you also have to run errands and make sure that during the weekend you kind of get ready for the coming onslaught of the week. So yeah.
And the inability to leave your machine. What are your, like, personal thoughts on AI?
Mm. Personal thoughts on AI. I think it's a revolution that's, I think, on par with crypto, right? So in terms of its impact, right? It's similar to, yeah, it feels to me similar to electricity or something. It's like this sort of very unique thing that you have intelligence on tap, right? Similar to how maybe people who had electricity, they were like, wow, we have light whenever we want, right? Like that's incredible.
I love that
Um,
analogy.
and I try to use it for more things. It's surprisingly good also at obviously code, at like writing stuff, but also just that, like, understanding yourself better. If you ever sort of are looking for like a coach, right, or like a sort of a therapist on demand, right, you can have very intelligent, serious, deep conversations
Mhm.
with AI about these things, right? So yeah, I would say it's very revolutionary, and it's going to change everything. And AIs will be banked with digital first money, right? That's, I think, the future that I see. I think that you see, that we all see, right? So this
Mm.
AI revolution is also going to it's going to propel crypto in many ways, right? Because it's just the natural way for machines to transact.
Mhm. I know, it almost feels like it's going to be the currency for AI, you know? It
Yeah. Or
more
to
so
solve
than
the AI alignment kind of problem, right? I think that's,
mm,
like, this is the thing that effective altruists were thinking about all this time. Like, hey, like, how do we program these AIs in such a way that they are good, right? And actually, we've kind of figured that out in crypto, right? We managed to align computers around a shared goal, right, without cheating the system, which is like Bitcoin, for example, or like on Ethereum or Solana with validators, right, or on Stacks with signers. Like, there are computers that are acting in concert together. I mean, they're doing something very simple, which is like
mm,
signing blocks, right? But they're acting, in concert, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and they're incentivized to do so. So yeah, with AI, like, I think that crypto can offer like a really meaningful, like very meaningful contribution to the development of artificial intelligence, with aligning computers and machines, basically.
Mm, yeah. What do you think of transhumanism?
I would say I haven't I haven't thought about it.
The merge of the code and the person, the machine
Mhm.
and the man. Does it freak
Yeah.
you out? Or do you kind of,
Well, I would say that, I mean, for one, I haven't maybe spent as much time thinking about this as I've spent about, Bitcoin and crypto and AI and those things.
well, maybe that's
But
something for you to read.
yeah, maybe. But I would say that, like, when it comes to sort of human and machines sort of merging, I think we've been on a sort of a sliding scale for a very long time, right? It's
Mm,
maybe we like to think that today we're not merged with machines, and tomorrow maybe we will be, but we are very much, right? I mean, like the way that we communicate here, right? The way that I think the
mm,
first thing we do in the morning is probably look at our phone, and if we don't, then it's like a very conscious effort to not do that, right? So
mhm,
we are already very much one with these digital systems, right? And yeah, it's only ever more important to make sure that they are aligned with with us, and that those systems, we're actually able to carry our identity and our property forward in
mm,
those, right? Rather than that we're being farmed.
mm. I asked AI like a while back, because it said something to me. I kind of ask it the weirdest things, and it said something about us being in the human-led phase. So I said to it, "Well, what happens after the human-led phase?" And so we kind of got into a conversation like that,
Mm.
and
What did it say? What was the first thing that it said?
it spoke about this where we merge. So it
Mm.
took me through the phases of the literal, what happens after, and because obviously then the lines get muddy, and then it kind of went further and further, and until we get to a point where only human consciousness exists, the body is gone, and then we are all gone. Okay. And so it had like this whole like freaking plan. And I'm like, holy moly, where's this plan coming from? And then I said to them, and then how would you describe, I don't have it on me, but it's so fascinating. How would you describe us? How would you describe humanity to, another life? And it was like reading the obituary of humankind. It was so sad. So, but I mean, look, that's a depressing thing, which is actually not my thoughts about it. It's more like a fascination, you know.
I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that after this. I'm very curious, but maybe I get a different answer.
Yeah, I'll send you, you know what I'll do? I'll send you, you can see what you can get and ask different AIs. I want to ask, like, because I just got into Manus. I'm just busy testing out. I don't know if you've tried Manus, um, which they're saying is like the first proper AI assistant. So it works very differently to ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is my friend. I can't dump
Mhm.
them just yet. um, all right, so let's give the standard kind of towards the end of the interview questions. Um, for people out there who, your life story and what you've done so far is extremely inspirational. So, how does somebody do that? Is it something that is just inside you? Are there lessons that maybe people can learn? How do you get from studying
Mm.
to there?
Yeah,
What is it?
yeah. It's it's interesting that you say it that way. I mean, I don't sort of wake up every day being like, wow, it's so impressive, so many things that I've done. And I also don't really, after you say it, also maybe don't think it's so impressive. I think there's many more impressive things to to come, and many even
So
way
we
bigger
know
things that
nothing,
I can
remember.
do.
I always think
So
of the philosophy of we know nothing.
yeah,
So you're still
true.
learning. Anyway.
True. But I would say that, yeah, like the thing, I think that's most important is to find like a lasting source of motivation, right? And to me, it's like it's this
Mm,
what we've talked about. Maybe to other people, it's something else, right? But to me, it's very much this idea of like, okay, there is something so revolutionary going on, something so big, and you'd want to be at the forefront because like that's the most fun. The most fun people are there, and it's the most interesting. And being at the forefront is, yeah, that's where you want to be. And then whether what you do works out or not, then that becomes secondary, right? And kind of when you can maybe let go of the outcome, then suddenly maybe things can become more successful or not. But like if they don't, then you'll have learned what will be, right? So I think it's all about that kind of lasting source of motivation, and yeah, in that sense, enabling yourself to show up every day, right? Because that's really what it's about. It compounds over many days of showing up rather than all at once.
I actually wrote that down. Lasting source of motivation. I think that is a beautiful thing to say.
I mean, I would say for me, maybe early in my life, I didn't have a very lasting source of motivation. When I was like young and I was still like a young adult or like old child, I guess. I was I was sort of motivated by it. Like, oh, I want to show people all these things, and then at some point I was like, hey, like this is not really working out, because what if I then achieve things and then I kind of feel empty afterwards? So we need to like find the real lasting source of rewire this, right? And yeah, then you can just keep going, and yeah, I feel that's kind of the most satisfying way to live.
And I think in what's being built here, I think just the fact that a person, obviously there's so many people showing up just going like, show me where I can make the money, and that's what I'm interested in. But I think if you are a person that has chosen to come here to build or to discover or whatever, that's such a huge step as well towards this journey, just that you showed up,
Yeah, and that money will probably come, right? Because it's like we're not working in charity, right? We are working in something that, if it is successful, sort of, creates value for the people that are involved in it. So, yeah, that will come. Of course, everyone needs to take care of themselves, but yeah, the outcomes they kind of come, and as long as you're, somehow if you're not motivated by them, they come quicker somehow always.
Yeah. All right, so let's do some rapid fire questions. This is a new thing I'm trying. I actually got a box of, it's so funny. It's like if when your parents pass away or your grandparents pass away, and then like years go by, because obviously, especially if you're young or even just through life, you change so many times. Your questions for them are always there. You always have a question for your grandparent or your parent, So there's a box that you can buy, and inside there has got like hundreds of questions about them, and then you can film it, and then you've basically got this, So that I was thinking to myself, I want to bring it on this interview, and then I was going to hold up cards, and I was going to make you pick 3 cards.
Okay.
And I was going to ask you the questions, but I left it. I've moved my office, and I just made a makeshift thing down here, so I don't have it. So we're going to ask you just some random ones I wrote down. What is your favorite book of all time?
Gosh, my favorite book of all time. I have to say it's the Iliad.
Ooh. I've just downloaded that on audiobook.
Yeah, it's great to listen to parts of it or jump in randomly. I think it's a very full, accurate description of humankind.
Yeah. All right, very good. I like it. You and me can, once I've read it, I'll let you know. We can have a book review.
Yeah.
Okay, one lesson from Oxford that you still think about.
Oh. One lesson from, I think, I would say maybe what I said about the lasting source of motivation, right?
That's nice.
You can maybe get there on, sort of on the path of burning things kind of on the way, but then to really sustain that for 40 years or longer, or a lifetime, you need a lasting source of motivation.
And isn't that why they say to find where you want to go with your career, you start with play? Because the more you play, the more you find out who you are. And you know what I mean? It's easier. Those are the kind of things you love. If you forced me to be like a pilot, I wouldn't have a lasting source of motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Sunrise or sunset?
Ooh, I would think sunsets because I'm usually not awake at sunrise.
Yes, good point. That is actually very true. Um, you're obviously not a parent
I'm not. I'm
who
not.
has
I'm
a
happy to
child
give
that
that
goes
away.
to school in the winter.
Yeah.
um, one historical figure that you'd like to interview, and don't say me.
Ooh. Just about to. But yeah, one historical figure that I'd like to interview. I think, well, maybe for what I'm doing right now, it could be very interesting to to speak to one of the early Rothschilds, right? And to figure out like, hey, how did they set up this sort of system, interlinked system of credit? And yeah, how did that actually work?
Mm. Geez, that would be a very helpful interview, actually, or very
Yeah, it
interesting.
would be helpful. It would be illuminating, and it would also be. We don't really know many of those things, right? Like we often know sort of, okay, there were like these and these financiers or something, but like
Mm.
how exactly did it really work? Like, okay, someone comes in with a loan, this, you write that, where does that debt paper go? Like, how did that actually really work? And I think that would be a very interesting, exercise to sort of understand as well. Like, yeah, do the things that we now reimagine or rebuild, like,
Mm.
are they the right things? Maybe there's something interesting we're missing.
Stacks actually needs a scribe.
A scribe?
Yeah, like somebody who just writes down everything that happens so that we have
Mm,
that one day. And they write about what's going on with Bitcoin. And because, a lot of this is going to end up being, you know, like other people are going to write a book that weren't here, or, I don't
yeah.
know, a random thought.
Mhm.
Um, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
Ooh, yeah, I guess very practically when I sort of exited the first company I started, right, the SaaS company, I kind of made a list of like things I thought was interesting, right, like working on building a better like financial future, right, that was one. Another one that I was very interested in was defense technology, right? And essentially this kind of stuff in 2020, right? And especially in Europe, right? It was kind of okay. Look, if say Germany is really going to spend a serious amount of capital rebuilding their military, they'll have the third largest one in the world. So there's probably some very interesting things to be done there. Um,
Well,
yeah, there were a few other things, but this one was like the other thing I was most interested in.
amazing. Okay, let's see. That brings us to, that I think we can stop on that one. Otherwise, I'll just sit here asking you random questions all night. Okay, well, I think, it's been for me just a wonderful opportunity to speak to you. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, any closing comments or maybe some alpha or.
Yeah, I guess in terms of closing comments or alpha, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for DeFi on Stacks, I think, this year. I mean, obviously we've not seen sort of crazy fireworks so far, but there's been a lot of work, behind the scenes to really, lift up the whole ecosystem. So yeah, like stay tuned, and
Mm,
yeah, I'm very excited, Monibus too, and everyone in the Stacks leadership to give it a really big shot this year at making a lot of things very real. So
yeah.
that's definitely something I'm very excited about. And go to zestprotocol.com and check it out, earn yield on some assets, earn yield on your BTC.
Mhm.
And yeah, we have the highest yield on BTC on Stacks today.
Amazing. Yeah, really amazing talking to you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. We're on the
Yeah,
same
you too.
time zone. Very nice to talk to somebody where you don't have to make it dark outside because it's still morning. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
Good. Good. Well, it was a pleasure, and yeah, great evening to you too. And then yeah, let me know when it's out, and then looking forward to sharing it and stuff
It's
like that.
out now. It's
No, it's out
live.
already.
Yeah.
Okay. I
We're
thought maybe it
live.
would be uploaded to YouTube later or something.
No,
but,
we're streaming live to YouTube. We're streaming live to X.
Brilliant.
So look,
Then
this is it. All right. Well,
amazing.
thank you very, very much. I'll chat to you soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Bitcoin and Beyond. I'm your host, Melanie Carstens. Thank you very much to Peace Love for producing the show. Thank you very much to Deorganized Media and to Bitcoin Live DB for powering us. We're here every single Thursday, 12 p.m. ET, and always lovely to have you. And once again, thank you to Tycho.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much, everyone.